Hello, and welcome to OLA 2020. Thank you for joining us in this session, Poetry on a Shoestring, presented by Peggy Cook, Shalla Strider, and special guest Dr. Brent Newsom. I'm Jennifer Terry, and I am the 2021 chair for the Children and Teen Services Roundtable. And I'm so happy to be moderating this session today. I am joined with our presenters, Peggy, Shalla Strider, and Dr. Brent Newsom. And I am going to fill you in on a little bit of their backgrounds. So Peggy has worked for the Pioneer Library System for more than 25 years. She currently serves as the regional coordinator and is the branch manager at the Shawnee Public Library. Cook holds her MLIS from the University of Oklahoma, and she graduated with her BA from Oklahoma Baptist University. She is a member of OLA, Folio, Beta Phi Mu, and is an active Rotarian. Brent Newsom is the author of the poetry collection Love's Labor and The Librettist for a Porcelain Doll, an opera based on the life of deaf-blind pioneer Laura Bridgman. His poems have also appeared in the Southern Review, the Hopkins Review, Cave Wall, and other journals. He lives in Shawnee and teaches at Oklahoma Baptist University. Shalla Strider has worked in public libraries in Oklahoma for 11 years. She is a recent graduate of the University of Oklahoma's MLIS program and has worked in finance, marketing, and communications, human resources, and currently serves as the adult engagement manager for the Edmond Public Library in the Metropolitan Library Systems. We're so glad that you joined us today for this Poetry on a Shoestring session, and I'm going to hand it over to Peggy.
Thanks so much. It's really exciting to be talking about this because this topic of poetry is really so dear to my heart, and I think for all of us who love language, words, literature, and who are interested in really delving into some questions about ourselves and understanding ourselves in the world better. Quite an opportunity to help people. You know, we all probably got in, part of why we might have gotten into librarianship is because we care about others, and I think really by exploring poetry, that's one aspect of what we can do to help people. So on our first slide, we see the information from the National Poetry Month organization, which is really the like the mothership of great ideas for poetry programming. And they have a great website. They send out free posters for the National Poetry Month that's coming up. You can go in and register your name and mailing address, and if you don't receive a free poster through the ALA distribution, they will send you a free poster anyway, just because they're an awesome organization and they're really dedicated to spreading the love of poetry. They have a great website that is robust and has numerous ideas for poetry, personal poetry journeys and classroom poetry ideas. They will send out lesson plans. They began in the 1990s, I believe, and they have great support. They do have some journals that you can, if you become a paid member, you can get their journals and receive a poetry quarterly through the mail and other great information. There's other resources at the end of our slideshow when you see that for similar organizations, but this is really the main site to be aware of as you're talking to your supporters and starting to share why this might be important in your school or community. There's lots of good ideas. On the next slide, we see the big question, why get into this? And I think that's a question that I had to answer as I was talking to my staff members and our Friends of the Library members and promoting this idea of getting started with a poetry contest, which we did begin in 2019 in Shawnee. And so I have great friends and board members, and Shalla worked at our branch at that time. And Dr. Newsom is certainly a wonderful friends, board member, advisory board member, and was willing to listen to me say we really need to promote poetry more strongly, because in Shawnee we do have a group of adults who continue to love poetry and talk about poetry, and we'll talk about that more. But Dr. Newsom immediately answered the call. So what was it, Dr. Newsom, that gave you this idea to support the public library in this?
Well, to respond to that question, I have to think anecdotally about my own history with poetry, and thank you to Jennifer for introducing us. So you've heard some of my recent engagement, but there's a long backstory to that, and I suspect, like most adult poets, there was a string of influential teachers or experiences that led up to a continued, sustained, lifelong engagement with the art of poetry and with the love of writing. For me, that began very early in elementary school. My earliest memories were second grade, a school poetry publication that was sponsored by our entire school system, that they would each year put together a collection of student writings from grades 1 through 12. And I was so proud when I had my acrostic poem about an aardvark accepted into that poetry publication. And I began to read poems by Shel Silverstein, sporadically sort of encountered other poets along the way, had a teacher in 8th grade who was really encouraging of our writing, and eventually began to write on my own in high school and then college. And Peggy has mentioned our local adult poetry group that meets once a month. It's a very welcoming group, and I was a college student in Shawnee, just beginning to sort of test out sharing my poems, and it was a really welcoming venue. So the library, when they began discussing the possibility of poetry programming, to me this seemed like a natural way to give back and to encourage young poets who may be in those early stages of discovering their voices, of coming to the realization that they can, that they have something to say and that their voice matters. And I think that's a really important thing to validate for our young people. For many young people, poetry can become an important outlet for processing and dealing with their feelings or their experiences in a way that's healthy and that serves the purpose also of further stimulating their engagement with language and their love of reading in addition to writing. I think that the two always go hand in hand. So why poetry? A quote that comes to mind from the poet William Carlos Williams. He says, "It's difficult to get the news from poetry, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." And there's so much that poetry offers outside of other forms of discourse, other forms even of literature. And so it's a real privilege to be able to introduce that to young people and to help them continue to engage with it.
And I would just like to add that while I was working at the Shawnee Public Library, as Miss Peggy and Dr. Newsom have said, we saw a need in the community for an outlet for young people to write poetry. There was a very, and still is, a very active adult poetry group, but we really wanted to provide that kind of third space for young people to be able to write poetry. That was not just for a school assignment, but rather for the love of poetry. So we really saw a need in the community for it. So if you're going to start a poetry celebration in your library, the first thing you have to do is find your people. And you want to think about the stakeholders who might be involved in this process. These might include your friends of the library members, library staff, and of course your library volunteers. This would be a great chance to connect with your school library friends too, or vice versa. Maybe you're a school librarian and you could reach out to your public library. We would recommend starting at least 3 months out to allow everyone to have enough time to plan and to integrate poetry activities into their class plans or into their regularly scheduled public programs. You can also reach out to local businesses. Local businesses can support by hosting public events or providing the space for events or refreshments. And think about those businesses who might be interested in language and literature. So you'll want to create a steering committee from these different community organizations because your steering committee is going to be your greatest source of help. They're going to be your taskmasters, and some of the tasks might include that the first year is always the biggest challenge. So getting somebody and getting the right people in your corner is going to be really important to do. Do you have anything to add, Miss Peggy?
No, you did a great job. I think whether you're in a large library or a small library, you know, this might be 2 or 3 people, or it might be 7 or 8 people like we had. So it is better if that can be shared, and it also helps build capacity for your program to develop and mature. So here are some of our wonderful friends, members, people who are very active in supporting us. And you can see we went ahead and developed a logo that was based on the poetry of Jim Spur, and our friends group supported the idea of naming our contest, which is a celebration of youth poets. It's a celebration of young poets in memory of Mr. Spur, and I'm sorry I didn't have the opportunity to meet him. He sounds like he was a wonderful and interesting person who certainly loved poetry and had been named the Poet Laureate of Shawnee. So there certainly is a lot there that I have yet to learn about him. So his Live Loud statement has become our theme, and hopefully, like as Dr. Newsom has said, it does help empower children to share their words and know that there's value in their words. So we went the whole route and have a t-shirt committee, and we're working on, we were in the midst of finalizing our plans for this year's t-shirt when COVID-19 struck, sadly, in the pandemic. So that's all ready for next year when that happens next year. So the friends, really, any friends group or library advisory board can be a really great base, or PTA group can be a great base for this, because for success in programming and in then community engagement, if you do decide to have a contest, community buy-in is really important. You know, I'm sure that many of you have been in the position of soliciting small gifts or donation items from businesses, and you hear from them and you have empathy for them when they comment about how often they receive requests like that. So making sure that you have a really targeted group that you are communicating with and asking for help from is going to is going to help in success, but then let them celebrate some, you know, offer them an opportunity to share some of that, to have an event, to send thank you notes and show things in their businesses. So your friends, remember to thank your friends and ask them to be involved and provide opportunities. Your library board, ask them to help publicize that or share the word on their social media. Work with your schools or vice versa. You know, obviously we work in public libraries, but our English teachers and principals and grade level teachers and grade groups, you know, teaching groups were great supporters, as were several local homeschool groups in our community. And then if you have educational sorority or social clubs in your community or fraternities that support educational opportunities, that could be a great support and help provide either support at events or for programming, or help provide some financial support. You know, it'll be up to you to decide what you do. We did decide, our steering committee had the opportunity to provide some cash prizes for children. We did find that Shalla will have several things to say about timing and receipt of the contest things, but we did find that one thing I'm going to work with our volunteers to do is get all of that set up for distribution maybe a week before the event and just put the names on the winners. So yeah, she will tell you privately that I tend to think everything will go perfectly.
That's a great segue into talking about how do you plan for this. So
Yes.
here we are under construction. The Poetry Month is under construction. And so you're going to want to think about, how do you plan the different types of programs you want to do? How do you plan the entire month for Poetry Month? And are you going to have a contest? If so, what does that contest look like? So we're going to talk about each of these three things in the next couple of slides. First, we'll talk about planning programs. There are really two different kinds of programs that we do in public libraries. There are staff-led programs, kind of what you more think of as the more traditional public programming, where a staff member will lead a program for children, for teens, and let me just say, if a teenager likes it, adults are gonna like it too. So pretty much any program you can plan for children and teenagers, adults love to do those same things too. And then we also have more self-directed programs, sometimes called passive programming. And again, adults love to do the same kind of activities that kids do. Especially when you're talking about writing poetry, a lot of these are going to be fun for all ages. So one of the first staff-led programs we did was the poetry workshop. And this was directed for 4th through 6th graders in the library. We had Dr. Newsom come and lead a writing workshop where this is the result of a group poem that we all wrote together. Dr. Newsom, do you have anything you want to add about how the writing workshop went?
Sure. It was a wonderful experience. I developed or borrowed, more accurately, an exercise on teaching metaphor and the poetic form of an ode, just a poem in praise of something. And so it's a really simple opportunity to get the students, and this was 4th through 6th grade students, engaged with what they might like to write about, and we wound up, as you can see, writing an ode to lemonade, but then the students each wrote their own individual odes to all manner of things, and incorporated really fascinating and original metaphors into their writing. So it's really gratifying to see their creativity at work.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We started off by hearing, you know, like Dr. Newsom said, talking about the different parts of an ode and what makes an ode. So there really was that educational component to it. And then we wrote a group poem together. And then there was some free writing time for kids to write their very own ode. And then, of course, we had to serve lunch, pizza for everybody. It's always a good idea to have food at programs for children. It's always a good idea. And so following lunch, it was a 2-part program. We had the writing workshop, then lunch, and then kids could practice reading their poems out loud in a poetry slam. And so the young writers were encouraged to read their work out loud, and some of them really got into it. You can see we had lots of kids there that did enjoy reading out loud, but I do want to say that not everybody wanted to read their poetry out loud. And so it's very important that you allow children the space to get up and read their poems out loud, but we don't ever want to tell someone that they have to read their poetry out loud. Also, part of the getting ready to perform your poetry, I led the group in a sort of a warm-up exercise, which you can find lots of different acting warm-up exercises online or in theater books. The warm-up exercise that we did together, which was a lot of fun because we did it as a group, was saying tongue twisters out loud together. You start really slow. We did, "Diction is done in the front of the mouth with the lips and the tongue and the teeth." And then you do it faster. "Diction is done in the front of the mouth with the lips and the tongue and the teeth." And then you just keep doing it faster and faster until we're all just giggling on the floor together. It is a great way to get kids comfortable with speaking out loud and to just have a lot of fun. So yeah, it was a really good poetry slam. I'm really glad we did it. The next program I want to talk about are some self-directed programs, or sometimes called passive programs. Here we see an example of Post-it note poems. This particular image came from the online blog Art Off the Grid, and what you would do in this self-directed program is you would leave different colors of Post-it notes out on the public floor, and either different kinds of Sharpies or maybe different kinds of pens, and people can write their own line of poetry and add it to a like a whiteboard or some sort of maybe a cork board that people could stick it and build a poem together as a community. The next kind of passive program we have here is the book spine poetry. And this particular poem came from the Pioneer Library System. This is one that one of our staff members had made. And you just stack books on top of each other. And this would make an excellent book display. If you have the space for book displays in your library, you could stack the books, and as you can see, the spine labels make the poetry. The next suggestion we have is blackout poetry. Many of you will already be familiar with what blackout poetry is. This particular example is from Flickr, and in this case you would take maybe some of your discarded books or some of your weeded books and allow customers to do blackout poetry, give them some Sharpies and do some blackout poetry with the pages from discarded books. This next passive program is called Poem in Your Pocket, and this was really popular at the Shawnee Public Library, where staff can print out colorful miniature poems, and you would leave them out on the public floor just like you would any other type of flyers, but instead of being 8.5 by 11, you make them miniature so they could fit in your pocket. Do you need a poem? Take a poem.
This is also a good demonstration of why you should take a picture of everything that you do. Sorry. People did love this.
So after you've thought about all of the different programs that you want to do, and you're full of all these really great ideas, and you're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, and people will love this, this is a great idea. now's the time to start thinking about your timeline. Will there be programs all month long? When would the contest begin? What is the deadline for entries of your contest? For the Shawnee Library, we offered multiple poetry programs throughout the entire month, and we had our marketing department post an article about Poetry Month and the Jim Spur Poetry Contest on our public website for the entire month of April. And we did accept entries to the contest through the end of the month, through April 30th. And I want to point out that if you're doing a youth contest, children are very literal. And so if you say the deadline is the 30th, that is when you are going to get all of your submissions. Kids often do not turn in homework assignments or any assignments early. So if you say that the 30th is the deadline, be prepared to receive nothing all month long and then 200 on the 30th. So more about planning the contest. You want to have your steering committee outline all these details that we've been talking about. And so you'll want to decide on any categories if you want to have categories. For the Jim Spur contest, we offered first, second, and third place in 3 different age categories. We decided to do it by grade level. So we had grades 4 through 6, 7 through 9, and 10 through 12th grades. And then we also offered a Best in Show award that covered all age groups. We offered low-cost prizes like ribbons, and we used certificates that you can print out. I think we actually bought the certificate paper from Walmart for just a couple of dollars. It was very affordable to do. You can also reach out to your local businesses or the people who might be on your steering committee for partners that could maybe provide coupons or a free ice cream sundae as a prize. And if local businesses are involved, not only is that good for presenting prizes, but it's really good to increase word of mouth marketing. If local businesses are involved, other people are going to talk about it. So be sure to ask your partners to share the contest on their websites or in their local storefronts. So what not to forget? How are you going to judge the contest? I recommend creating a rubric of judging criteria beforehand. You'll also want to think about how will you return the poems to the writers, because many of these young writers, they want their poems back. It was a little bit hectic for us the first year of the Jim Spur Poetry Contest because we didn't think about returning the poems to the children. But of course they want them back. They want to hang up their award-winning poetry. So you'll want to have a plan for how you're going to organize that and not be scrambling around last minute trying to find each kid's poem. You'll also want to make sure you get parents' permission for youth to participate. On your entry form, you're going to want to make sure you have a line for parent signatures on there. When you're dealing with minors, you definitely want to always get parental consent. Also, if you're thinking about publishing these poems either on your website or in the local newspaper, you'll want to get additional permission to publish those poems. And you'll also want to think about who's going to take photos during your poetry celebration. Make sure somebody on your steering committee has thought about who will take photos and who's in charge of posting to social media if you're going to do social media. Is there anything else we want to not forget, Peggy or Dr. Newsom? All right, I think that's it.
Covered it well.
So this was our Jim Spur Poetry Contest and Celebration of Young Poets. These are our winners. And like I said, we made these certificates using paper that we purchased from Walmart and just printed them with their names on our printer. The little gift bags that you can see, the little brown gift bags, included a pen, a notebook, a bookmark, and a book of poems. Our friends at the library also very generously donated cash prizes and t-shirts for all of the winners. So thank you to the Shawnee Friends of the Library.
And you'll see that we are kind of down at the end of one area of our library for that. We were thrilled with the attendance for that event, even as a first-time event, because each child was, did we notify those children that they probably should be present? We didn't tell them what they had won beforehand.
We didn't tell them what they had won. I called all of the parents and I told the parents that their children had placed in the contest, but they had to come to find out what place they got.
Yes, and each child probably had a minimum of 2, 3, 4 other people with them. So it was thrilling for them.
Yes, I think we had a turnout of about 60, 70 people total. It was a really great turnout. A lot of people wanted to celebrate poetry. A lot of people came, even if they hadn't placed, they wanted to see who else had won and to hear the other poetry that was submitted. For our contest, we gave the children the option of reading their poetry aloud, kind of like we did at the Slam, where we provided the space and said, if you would like to read your winning poem, you can, but of course we did not require that they read their poem. So it was really neat to see a lot of kids who hadn't placed but wanted to come and support their friends or just to hear the other poetry that had won. Okay, so now we want to think about how do we tie this in to the collection? Because so much of public libraries, a lot of our focus is promoting the collection. So you can promote poetry using book displays, of course. And at each program, I recommend making a book display of books available for library customers to check out at the end of the program. This year, what would have been this coming April, the Shawnee Library had also planned to highlight the collection using that spine poetry example that I shared earlier, in which staff used the spines of books to create poems by stacking the books. Staff can also create book lists. I know that I love creating book lists. It's a great opportunity to do that. And these lists can go on the library's website, as well as being available in paper form in the library for people to just pick up. The book list could include local poet laureates. Many cities have their own, and of course, lots of Oklahoma poets. There are a lot of Oklahoma poets out there. So next we want to talk about outcomes. It's very well and good to have poetry programs, a poetry contest. We are promoting the collection, but what is the end result we're looking for? I want to talk a little bit about what to expect from different age groups. Very young learners are still acquiring basic literacy, and so they're going to need a lot of support. Also the young learners, they will benefit a lot just from the exposure to poetry. The 3rd through 5th graders, they're going to be very open and eager to like play with the language, so you're going to have a lot of fun with, I had a lot of fun with the 3rd through 5th graders. Dr. Newsom, do you want to talk a little bit more about the cognitive development for each different age group?
Yes, as Shalla said, if you do any programming with very young learners, say pre-K up through 2nd grade, something I've learned through experience is to keep things as simple as possible. The first time I did a poetry program with a local elementary school, I had some of my college students involved, and they were going into the classroom every week or two and helping coach the students in that classroom through a poetry writing exercise. And we thought, oh, well, 1st graders are learning about rhyme. Let's have them write rhymed couplets, 2 lines of rhymed poetry. And it turns out 1st graders are learning to recognize rhyme, But that's very different from producing rhyme and producing rhymed lines. That turned out to be extremely challenging. So I would strongly encourage you to lean on connections you may have to school teachers who can help advise whether various programs or projects are appropriate for the age of the child they're targeting. For older students, middle school students, these students are growing into their social awareness, and certainly friends are becoming much more important to them. That's a great stage to reach out with collaborative poetry exercises. Encourage them to write something together in small groups or as a large group. Excellent way to engage them. And of course, as they grow older through adolescence, they begin to encounter more and more difficult experiences and themes as well. And this may come out in their writing too. You may see in poems submitted for the contest or written through a local poetry program, content dealing with sex and sexuality, depression or other mental health issues, self-harm. So be prepared for that and understand that writing is one healthy way of processing challenging experiences and material, while also being sensitive if there is something deeply concerning or troubling to you, that it may be appropriate for the librarian to reach out to that student. And Shalla, you may have some advice there too.
Yes, I do have some advice. Basically, you just want to create a safe space. You don't really ever want to make the child feel embarrassed about what they wrote. You want to try to be trauma informed if you do see something that's especially troubling. And remember that your role as a librarian is to refer the student to their school counselor or to talk with a trusted grown-up in their life like their parent. It is not the librarian's role to start asking, why did you write this? You could just simply say, hey, this is a very powerful poem. I think you should maybe talk about this a little bit more. Have you talked with your school counselor about this? So our role as librarians is to refer the student to the school counselor or to a trusted grown-up in the child's life. So talking more about the opportunities that poetry creates for children. Other possibilities are to be creative, and not just to be creative, but the opportunity to create things. Sometimes poetry is left out in our society. Oftentimes other arts are more emphasized in schools. And it also gives young people the tools to be creative. It also presents the opportunity to collaborate with other people, to complete a text, which can be, completing a text can be difficult for some readers, but poetry, you might be able to read an entire poem where a child may not have been able to read an entire chapter in a regular book before. So it also gives children the opportunity to practice reading and to experience fluency as readers. It gives the opportunity to express their individual experiences and perspectives. And one thing to consider is that most students' first encounter with poetry is in the classroom, which has a very different set of expectations, those of good grades. And so creating a space to learn and practice poetry in a third space that's outside of the school, this type of expression in the library gives kids the freedom to write without the expectation of being graded.
So I'll just take a moment here to describe my experience as the one non-librarian on the panel. It was just such a wonderful collaboration from the beginning. And I'm very grateful to my librarian partners for the work that they did and that our community did, the members of our task force and the Friends of the Library. I had the opportunity to not only lead the workshop and be part of the slam, but also serve as one of the judges for the Jim Spur Poetry Contest, and to be an MC at the awards presentation. So I felt like I was really blessed with the opportunity to have several sort of touch points with the young people who are coming to the library and who are engaging with poetry in this way. A very, very gratifying experience. If you're doing a poetry program or thinking about doing one and you have a university in your community, it's worth adding to your list of possible contacts someone on the English faculty at that university. Don't be afraid to reach out and try to build bridges there as well. I'm confident that a faculty member who loves poetry and may be accustomed to teaching it in one setting would really benefit and enjoy teaching it in this other setting. In some ways, much more kind of low pressure and creative and fun environment.
As Peggy said in the beginning, we're going to have a list of resources for you. So this is a list of resources that we used for the Jim Spur Poetry Contest. It includes, of course, the poets.org, which is the biggest website for National Poetry Month. I also used many lesson plans that were free and a lot of digital tools from readwritethink.org. I failed to mention earlier, one of the other poetry programs we did was digital poetry writing, and readwritethink.org has a lot of really great online digital tools for creating haikus, for creating couplets, for creating diamond poetry. So if you want to incorporate computer and digital literacy, I highly recommend readwritethink.org. Of course, you can always go to the pioneerlibrarysystem.org. Pioneer has a lot of really great resources on its website. Dr. Newsom highly recommends, and he used Kenneth Cope's Wishes, Lies, and Dreams. Also Terry Ann Thaxton, Creative Writing in the Community. And another great resource that is, it's a YouTube channel called Hours Poetica, kind of a play on words there. But that has a lot of really great YouTube videos that are just delightful to watch, and it's a really great resource for everybody.
Well, and I've realized that we don't have a link to our Pioneer Library System YouTube channel where Dr. Newsom's students, he had students in an upper level class that worked on a project, and that they created a video, and that should be on our YouTube channel. So you can find those students leading those, providing that program on our Pioneer Library System YouTube channel. So awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Peggy, Shalla, and Dr. Newsom. That was super enlightening for me as I'm stepping back into the English classroom part-time this year on top of my school librarian duties, and I will definitely take what you guys have talked about here into trying to teach poetry to my upcoming seniors, which is always fun. So I do have a question. Rarely do you get to talk to an actual poet. So for Dr. Newsom, as someone who's written poetry, and for me as a teacher, when you are presenting your poem to the reader, what is it that you want your reader to get out first? Because I know you talked about poems being attached to grades, and that's always in the forefront of the student's mind. So when we're looking at a poem in a classroom or with a group of, if it is a poetry club, what do you think is most important that your reader walks away with from your poem? Is it your meaning? Is it the beauty of the language? Is it their own personal connections?
Oh, that's a great question. And I don't think there's any right answer to that. I think one thing I would stress with any reader of poetry is that poems ought to be reread. I like to compare them to listening to songs on the radio. Sometimes students, because of the way they've been taught poetry before, or because of certain kinds of pervasive ideas we might have about poetry or stereotypes about poetry, they come at a poem like a puzzle, as if there's some right answer that they have to figure out, and if they can't figure it out, they're somehow stupid or missing something or whatever. And that's not at all the case, really. I don't listen to songs on the radio going, what do they mean? You know, what is this singer saying? It may be the 5th or 10th or 15th time I've heard a song before I, realize, oh, the second verse says such and such. I think this is, a poem about blank, or a song about blank. The same thing can happen with poetry. So I would stress reading and hearing the poem, hearing it aloud, not just on the page, and allowing each student to find something they connect with, or each reader to find something they enjoy. It may be one or two particular lines that stick out to them. It may be a particular metaphor, sometimes just the sounds of the poem. Even if you're not sure what they mean or what the poet's trying to say, you recognize there's a certain pattern of sound, whether the poem's rhymed or unrhymed, either way. Still, poets are attentive to the way that the words sound on the page. So I would encourage those readers and those students to take sort of a low stress approach to poems, and allow yourself the space to hear it and read it several times, and allow your understanding of the poem to grow with rereading.
Awesome. That's great. I like that low stress approach. So thank you again, all three of you, for presenting, and thank you for those who have joined us for this session today. If you have questions, since we're not live, there's the contact information for all three of our presenters. I'm sure they would be happy to receive an email if you do have any further questions. Again, thank you for joining us. We hope that you join us for other sessions that we have going on during this time. And we hope that you have a great day. Thank you so much.